Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Greg Ramsey. From the world of professional boxing comes one of the most iconic fighters of all time, with freakish power and unbridled intensity, a man that rose to the top of the sport while also indulging in the excesses of fame, later becoming a pop culture figure who is widely considered to be one of the all-time greats. We're talking about Mike Tyson. Born in Brooklyn, New York on June 30th, 1966, Mike Tyson overcame a troubled childhood which saw him arrested 38 times by the age of 13. Tyson's natural boxing ability revealed itself while in a boys' home, and that led to his introduction to renowned trainer Cus D'Amato. D'Amato became a father figure to the young fighter, and thanks to his work, as well as the work of trainer Kevin Rooney, Tyson excelled in his amateur career, winning gold medals in the 1981 and 1982 Junior Olympic Games. Tyson went pro at the age of 18 and went on a winning streak which saw him tear into his opponents and knock them out in quick fashion. Tyson took down every fighter in his path, ultimately opening the door for him to challenge for the heavyweight championship. Cus D'Amato did not live long enough to see 20-year-old Mike Tyson win his first world title, the WBC championship, in 1986. Tyson won the WBA championship in 1987 and added the IBF championship to his trophy case later the same year. Mike Tyson became the first man to win all three titles, thus becoming boxing's first undisputed champion. Tyson's career was greatly affected by infamous boxing promoter Don King, who saw an opening next to the champ and took advantage of it. The two became inseparable, and Mike Tyson brought more spotlight to boxing than the sport had seen in quite some time. Mike Tyson's personal life began to make the headlines during this time thanks to his troubled marriage to actress Robin Givens. The couple's problems began almost immediately, and many boxing analysts believed it was Tyson's issues that ultimately led to his first loss on February 11, 1990. That loss came at the hands of Buster Douglas in Tokyo, Japan. Though Tyson was a 42-1 favorite heading into the fight, it became obvious that he was not physically ready for Douglas, who was highly motivated to step up to the champ. Tyson's personal problems, combined with the negative influence of Don King, resulted in an undisciplined fighter who had lost his way. Tyson's life spiraled out of control, leading to his divorce from Givens and later to a conviction for rape on February 10, 1992. Tyson served just under 3 years in prison and was released in March of 1995. Tyson returned to boxing and regained the world championship, which he lost to Evander Holyfield in 1996. A second bout between the two in 1997 ended in controversy when Tyson bit off a piece of Holyfield's right ear. Tyson's career began to decline at this point, and later fights against Lennox Lewis revealed that the once unstoppable fighter was now a frustrated man ready to leave the ring. Tyson dealt with addiction, arrests, and legal issues in the years that followed his retirement. Iron Mike Tyson eventually reached a point when he was finally able to find peace. He became a cultural icon and has re-emerged as a popular personality in mainstream media. His boxing career is heralded by many as one of the best that the sport has ever seen, and his power, as well as the intimidation factor in the ring, continues to be the stuff of legend. And that's the lowdown on Mike Tyson. Sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone, and I feel like that's what we're doing with this episode. Most of the time we talk about things that interest both of us, that we're both extremely passionate about, things that sometimes we both grew up with or affected us at a very young age, or sometimes it's just things that we're both sort of really into, whether it's, from childhood or adulthood, either way, sometimes a mix of both. But this time, we're doing something a little bit different. Something outside the box, I guess I could say. Pun intended, because this time we're talking about boxing. And when you pitched this to me for an episode, I immediately thought, well, hang on, let me think about this. And then it became, oh my God, we totally have to do this. Because while I can't say I was a huge Mike Tyson fan, I can definitely tell you that he impacted a lot of the world that I inhabited growing up as a teenager in terms of, TV, sports, pro wrestling, comic books, all this other stuff, larger than life characters, Muhammad Ali, the idea of icons and all that stuff has always intrigued me. being a comic book fan, it's always been part of my everyday vocabulary, I guess you could say. So Tyson became part of that vocabulary for me. So while, again, I wasn't a huge fan, this makes all the sense in the world. So I know that most of the time, you and I consider each other and consider ourselves pro wrestling guys, in a combination with a lot of other things. I don't know if I've ever called myself a boxing guy, although I do appreciate the sport, and I've watched boxing over the past several years and tried to really get into it. I can't say I'm an MMA fan, though. I have nothing against the sport, but if I know very little about it in terms of who can do what, whose record is what's going to happen next week, next month, next year, whatever. So boxing is sort of one of those sports that's kind of on my peripheral. When Tyson was red hot and he was the man, he was invincible. I mean, where was he in terms of your everyday existence? Was he on your radar? Did you check him out? Did you watch him? Were you interested? What was it about Tyson when he was in his prime?
Yeah, I wanted to keep up with Tyson because, I mean, he was making such an impact in boxing. He was, kind of the face of boxing at the time. He brought it back to the forefront from, names like Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, Larry Holmes. I mean, this guy put boxing on the map in the 80s and 90s as well. And, I just wanted to keep track of what this guy was doing. I mean, even though I wasn't a boxing fan, I could like boxing because of this guy, and that's what made him special. And I'm sure a lot of other people felt the same way. It's kind of like maybe Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, the home run race back in the 90s. If you weren't a baseball fan, you could at least be a fan of these guys, hitting all these home runs and chasing the record. So to me, Tyson was on my radar, at least in the peripheral.
So he's kind of like the Tiger Woods of boxing, because like golf was always there. I don't think anybody really cared about it. Probably people cared less about golf than they did about boxing, if we're being fair about this. But Tiger brought more eyes to the product and brought fans to the table who maybe weren't there to begin with. Tyson, to your point, did the same thing for boxing. And it wasn't because here's an African American. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that he was just fun to watch. I mean, this guy was a stone cold killer. And I mean, we didn't know a lot about his personality in the beginning. All we saw was this pit bull of a guy who absolutely was all out, was to the wall, was no apologies, was full force, was like a bullet out of a chamber, man. And when he lit into you, brother, you better look out. And if you didn't have a strong jaw, you were going down. And he took down some of the biggest and best fighters, that history has seen. And he also took down some contenders who maybe didn't deserve to actually be contending for a championship at the time, but he took down fighters, I would say, from all walks of life. But man, this guy was, talk about Undertaker and WWE. Mike Tyson was the phenom of the boxing world.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you mentioned the phrase stone cold because, we're going to mention that a little bit later on, I imagine, because sometimes Mike Tyson crossed over into the world of professional wrestling and made an impact there as well. So, and, to me, in the ring, when Tyson in his prime, man, this guy is an assassin. He's crushing. He's efficient. He's like the Raging Bull, Robert De Niro. Remember that movie? Yeah, that's who Tyson was, and still maybe could be. Maybe there's still a Raging Bull inside this guy. He had that aggression from where he grew up, and he used that in the ring, and it was very successful. A lot of these bouts didn't get through the first round, and that amazes me. I just never saw a guy like that before. And it was something, very unique and new. So yeah, he made history, definitely.
And I like the fact that you mentioned WWE because, as I said before, kids, we're pro wrestling guys, and so a lot of our frame of reference may not begin with the business, but it's probably going to include it at some point, just like it includes comic books and movies and TV and whatnot. So, usually what we typically do here on the show is we sort of give you like a behind the scenes, behind the music, if you will. We sort of take you through the process about who he is and what he became and what he becomes and all this other stuff. But honestly, I don't know, man. I think maybe we just jump into the pro wrestling bit and then work our way around it. So let's talk about Mike Tyson and WWE, because why not? This guy, and again, we both knew who he was. We were both very aware of his career at the time. This was the Mike Tyson who had, been out of prison on a rape conviction. I mean, this is not the same guy that came. It's not the same 20-year-old that came in and became one of the youngest world champions of all time, and boxing's first undisputed champion of all time. This was not the same cat. This was someone else who was, putting his career and his life back together, or attempting to. And man, when he showed up in WWE, even Eric Bischoff at the time looked at that, because it was in the midst of the Monday Night Wars, and Bischoff looked at that move and said, man, that's pretty good. So even he was in awe of the fact that Vince and company got him to come on. And, call it for what it is, man. Tyson's a huge pro wrestling fan, as a lot of boxers are, because pro wrestling's all show. And Tyson, like Ali and like George Foreman and Frazier, a lot of other guys in that sport, it's about the song and dance. It's about talking people into the building. It's what Dusty Rhodes did better than anybody else in the business. Made you want to see the matches so bad you take the last $10 you had to buy a ticket. And I mean, Tyson appreciated that. He looked up to these guys as they were superheroes when he was a kid. When he was growing up, he loved pro wrestling. He loved being backstage in WWE, and he loved the experience. And he was such a fan, and approached these guys with the utmost respect, and was sort of fanboying out over all these cats, which is very cool to hear, that a guy in that position, of that stature, could humble himself enough to where he didn't come in with an ego. He didn't come in thinking he was bigger, better than anybody else. He just wanted to be one of the boys. And man, from everything I've ever heard, read, and seen, they accepted him as one of their own, and he loved being backstage with those guys.
Yeah, I like the fact that he decided to pay homage to a sport that he grew up watching and loved. And what perfect timing then, when Stone Cold was coming of age there. And you have Tyson coming in to be the big, sort of getting Stone Cold's face and, piss him off.
Right.
And you have this big altercation. All these guys are surrounding them, trying to pull them apart. It was one of the best moments ever, on Raw, and obviously one of the best Stone Cold moments. Of course, Stone Cold gives Tyson the double bird, and Tyson shoves him, and from then on, it's chaos, it's pandemonium. And I remember Vince McMahon telling Stone Cold, you ruined this night, because this was supposed to be, Mike Tyson, this was a special night, bringing him onto the show, because, this was one of the most famous boxers at this time in the world, in history. So yeah, Stone Cold kind of ruined that moment, but it was very exciting, very entertaining, and I'm sure all wrestling fans, probably boxing fans, loved it as well.
Dude, you tell me if I missed something here, because maybe I did, but ever since this night, when we saw it live, ever since that night, the question in my head's always been, what did he ruin? What was it that Austin ruined? Because Vince was in the middle of saying, and so that's why, at WrestleMania 14, in this very ring, Iron Mike Tyson, then suddenly the glass broke, here comes Austin. So, dude, I've read up on this, I've asked people, if the answer's online, I don't see it, maybe I'm not looking in the right place, I don't know. But what was the initial plan here? Like, you have any idea, what was the supposed announcement Vince was going to make? Was he going to announce Tyson was wrestling? What was it he was, because I've missed it. If there's ever been an answer, I've missed it.
That's a good question. Maybe Vince just wanted to announce that Tyson was going to be at WrestleMania, to be the special guest referee, and he didn't want any interference from Stone Cold. But of course, the Austin's going to come out and do what he wants to do. He's going to rebel and get in the face of the owner and tell him he's a loner. And so it just worked, man. It was a great idea, and they pulled it off perfectly.
Yeah, man, it was a night to remember, and it's one of those moments, because this company replays the Attitude Era forever. They've done it for years. Ever since the thing came to an end, they can't stop talking about it, because it was the hottest era they've ever had, right? So they're always going to show the Tyson clip, and, Austin's in there, and he's like, I don't know how good your hearing is, so here's to you. Talking about sign language, and he flips him off.
Yeah.
And then Tyson's like, what? What? Because he's trying to shake her hand. I was like, I'm not going to shake her hand. Like, it's so good. You could tell a lot of that crap was ad-libbed, right? A lot of that stuff was Austin just riffing in the moment. Tyson trying not to smile too much. And because, he's had the time of his life. And in that pull apart, man, one of his guys dropped a wad of cash, like a huge roll of cash out of his pocket, and was like struggling to pick this money up off the mat. And I'm like, screw the pull apart, man. I'm just going to die for the money and try to get out of there. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was chaos. So yeah, man, that happened. And obviously we know the story from there. He shows up WrestleMania 14. They do this thing where, Shawn has a confrontation with him in the ring. He tears his shirt off, and, Tyson has a DX shirt on, and he's supposedly with DX. He's with Hunter and Shawn and China, and it's, they're just doing what they do, and it's the rest of DX too. X-Pac and Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, they're all crotch chopping all the time. And man, Tyson, remember those spots, and he just kept crotch chopping the entire spot. He just kept doing it the whole time. And you're like, all right, that's enough, Mike. Someone tell this guy doesn't have to keep doing that through the whole promo.
Tyson had one of the best crotch chops I've ever seen, and he actually got to become an honorary member of DX. How cool was that? It was a lot better, I thought, than bringing Rodman into, like, saying being the 300th member of the NWO on WCW.
Right.
So Tyson stepped in, and he just fit the part, man.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, a ton of energy, huge fan, wanted to be there, had a blast. And, I don't imagine that this guy ever caused any trouble. If he did, we've never heard about it. He was just having fun. And we know that he was the outside enforcer. And, of course, the ref gets bumped during the match. And, of course, he comes in and, he doesn't count the 3 for Shawn. And Shawn's, upset with him. And then Tyson ends up knocking him out. So, yeah, and then the stunner happens and Austin pins him, and Tyson counts the quickest 3 you've ever seen. But it didn't matter because it was awesome, and the crowd popped, and Tyson did his thing, and he looked good with Austin after that, and they did press after that and all this other stuff. So, you had the backdrop of Shawn, pitching a fit after that match ended because, someone was taking his spot, Austin, to move up the ladder. But, in the midst of all this, you had Tyson sitting there just smiling from ear to ear because he had time of his life. So, it was good to see him as a fan. It was good to see him in that mode because all we had ever known, we knew 2 things. We knew 3 things. 1, we knew the invincible, unstoppable Mike Tyson, the juggernaut in the ring. 2, we knew the terrible attitude, the constantly getting in trouble, acting out, running his mouth. And then we knew about the rape conviction. And that's kind of all we knew. And we thought, well, God, this guy, he's crap and he's this and he's that. Because, man, when he came out of prison, he did not come back to the world that loved him and took him in to begin with and feared him and all this other stuff. This guy had become a joke. He'd become a punchline at that point. But to see him enjoying what he was doing and not being there for any political reasons, not trying to sell a book or do anything like that, he was just wanting to have fun. I thought that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I think he needed it as well. Sometimes, you get in a rut in life and, you make bad decisions and you need a new beginning. And it's almost like Tyson was kind of reborn in this moment. Not to say that, after this he was perfect, but, for that one night or maybe that those 2 nights, Tyson really was able to find his smile, as Shawn said before he vacated the title one night on Raw. He was able to find his smile and kind of really have a good time. I like to see that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was refreshing. So that's just one small part of it. Obviously, there's a lot more to go here in terms of who this guy is, who he was, everything he meant to the world of boxing, everything he means now, and all the work that he put in to get to where he was. As we know, this guy had a very troubled childhood. No father around. That was going to play into part of who he became as a man, as a young man, and then later on, as he got older, it was always going to be an issue with him, a void he tried to fill, sometimes with the wrong people. But we know the story. Cus D'Amato takes him in and begins training him, sees something in him, sees the possibility. He's telling Mike right off the bat, you're going to be the greatest fighter ever. And he's selling this guy. He's hyping him up to anybody who will hear. Tyson's 18 and an amateur, and Cus trains him up. And I cannot swear to you that I knew about the style of boxing that D'Amato specialized in, but when I heard the term peekaboo style, I said, oh my God, I never could explain it, but that's exactly what it is. And for anyone that's ever watched Tyson fight in his prime, you know exactly what we're talking about. Tyson basically would hold his hands up to his face, keep his arms drawn tight to his body, and then move in very close. And brother, when Mike Tyson in his prime is close to you, anywhere close is too close, okay? So he's in very close quarters with his opponent, and he's ducking the swings. And every time he ducks, Tyson's able to shift his body weight to one leg or the other. And what makes this work is that Tyson had knockout power with both hands and felt comfortable fighting with either foot forward. Dude, his style and the way he preferred to fight with the peekaboo style, it was a perfect storm of what a great fighter could be in the future.
Yeah, I mean, and he had that thick body. He was almost like Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk. You know, I was just watching videos, and it just came to me that this guy was kind of like Lou Ferrigno. And I think he had the right mixture of power and speed. In my opinion, he's probably the hardest hitter in boxing history. Sometimes he knocked the guy's mouthpiece and it went out of the ring almost. Right. So, yeah, just to watch his hits in slow motion, it made me cringe, man. It made me cringe for the other guy because I'm thinking, wow, did he just break his neck? You know, I really felt sorry for his opponents. And, you know, I think all of his opponents really need T-shirts that say, I fought Mike Tyson and survived.
Right.
Because, I mean, this guy was an animal. You know, like we talked about, the troubled childhood, I think he channeled all of that into aggression in the ring and just took it out on all these guys. And these poor souls, man, you know, you really had to, you know, feel sorry for them after, you know, they're laying on the mat and they're either unconscious or they don't know where they're at. They don't know what planet they're on.
Well, I can tell you this. I know for sure growing up as a teenager, I can't tell you I bought every Tyson fight because I knew better. Because after the first couple, you're like, all right, you're not going to fool me with this $50, $60, you know, price tag, or maybe higher at the time. I don't remember. But this fight's going to last like 90 seconds. I'm not falling for this again because it never got out of the first round, hardly ever, right? So,
yeah, it wasn't very economically smart to buy a Tyson boxing pay-per-view because, you know, after the first few, like you said, it wasn't going to last. It wasn't going to go the duration. Tyson was there to take care of business, and that's what he did, man. He made short work of his opponents early on in his career.
No doubt about it, man. And as we said, D'Amato deserves all the praise for this and all the credit in the world for getting him ready, for getting this kid's mind where it needs to be. Tyson needed something to focus on. As we said before, he had a troubled childhood. You know, father figure that wasn't there and had all kinds of issues, run-ins with the law all the time. And he needed something to focus on. And not only that, he needed something to take his aggression out on. And the boxing ring was the best place for it. Now, you can't just get into a boxing ring and just start throwing punches. That's not how this works. This isn't kickboxing or whatever where you can just, you know, kick to your heart's content. Boxing is very much a chess game. I mean, it's, you know, there's a reason why they refer to boxing as the sport of kings, because it's the gentleman's sort of duel without, you know, deadly weapons, I guess you could say, without firearms. And it's just two men putting on gloves and they're playing a game of chess with their bodies inside of a ring. That's really what it is. And in as much as pro wrestling is a dance, boxing is a chess game. It's, you know, you have to know when to be in position, when to move here, when to move there, and it's strategy. The whole thing about boxing is strategy. Anybody can lace up gloves and get in there and just start swinging. But brother, tell me what happens to you after 30 seconds. You're blown up. There's no more swinging. You're gassed. Even if you're in great shape, your cardio has to be there. And we saw that play out with Tyson later on when, you know, he started having issues in the ring and self-confidence started going south. But in the beginning, like we said, he was unstoppable and he needed something to focus on. His power, which you mentioned, really put him on the map because every boxing analyst, every sportscaster, and every fan that watched him fight, my God, go back now and watch those punches. Like you said, mouthpiece flying out in the front row and guys' eyes swimming for 20 minutes and still can't stand up and, you know, never been hit so hard in their lives as they've been hit by Tyson. My God. Channeling all that frustration and energy and pent-up anger and aggression and fear and all those emotions, man, everything into one punch. My God. This guy hit as hard as, I mean, as hard as Brock Lesnar, the other business that we like to follow, my goodness, I can't imagine taking a punch from that guy in his prime. Dude, you talked about these guys wearing T-shirts. I'd be surprised if some of them remembered, their full names even to this day. Their ears are probably still ringing after those punches. You kidding me?
I like the fact that you mentioned boxing is a gentleman's sport, and it's like Mike Tyson was anything but a gentleman in the ring. He was the deadly weapon you spoke of, and sometimes all it took was just one punch, and the match was over. This guy was swinging for the fences almost every time, and he made a lot of his punches count. He didn't have a lot of wasted blows there, so his opponent was usually on the run, and Mike Tyson was like the predator. His
Right.
opponent was the prey. So you had to stay away from Tyson as much as you could, maybe try to tie him up. But that didn't work for long. Tyson was going to find that moment and exploit the weakness from his opponent.
And we saw that with the Lennox Lewis fights. We saw it with Lewis later because Lewis tied him up quite a bit in an effort to tire him out, and it worked. It frustrated Mike to no end. And the commentary they were calling him on it, like, man, stop tying. George Foreman, I remember Foreman saying, stop tying him up. It's got to be frustrating for Tyson. Just fight. You got to let him know you're there. You got to punch. You got to go after him. And I'm thinking, dude, if you book me against Tyson, I'm going to tie him up as much as I can. Are you kidding me? I don't want to get hit. My God. So Lewis was a very talented fighter. Don't take anything away from this guy. He was a champ for a reason. But man, he got booed during that fight. I remember that he got booed for tying him up, but at the end of the day, it worked because he got the victory and he fought the better fight. He outsmarted Tyson. And, the two guys, in my opinion, that really did, and it's a long journey to get here, folks, but the two guys, in my opinion, who really did show Tyson up in terms of, strategy and showing him up for being sometimes the reckless fighter that he could become at certain points if he got too frustrated, was Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis. Back to back, man. Those guys, Holyfield figured him out first because Holyfield had as much intensity and as much charisma and as much motivation as Tyson ever did. But Holyfield was a gentleman. He wasn't, and so was Lewis, right? Neither one of these guys were considered, troublemakers or problem child or whatever. But man, I remember those fights in particular because it was the first time we'd ever seen Tyson really look human. Honestly, we'll get to Douglas, but man, talk to me about, when we started seeing Tyson sort of show that, hey, I'm human after all, and I can be beaten. What a change that was.
Yeah, it was very shocking for me because I had built up this image in my head that Tyson was indestructible and maybe inhuman at times. I thought of him as a machine. He was just a killing machine. And to see him, decline, in later years and not have the success that he was known for earlier in his career, it was just, man, it was like an alternate universe. Who is this Mike Tyson? And, Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis really exploited Tyson and, frustrated him to no end. They fought the smarter fight, like you said, and they just really made Tyson. I think they kind of got to the core of Tyson and maybe just really showed who he really was at times. Just like you said, I think they fought the gentleman's fight, and that was able to overcome the savage beast that Tyson could be at times. They
exposed him, right? He was exposed for the first time. Let's call it for what it is. Buster Douglas did it first. Douglas beats him in Japan, and I didn't watch the fight. I'm sure it was live here in the States, probably on pay-per-view. But I think the very next day it's on SportsCenter, and I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean he lost? Like, I was in shock. And talk about looking human. Go back and watch that Douglas fight. Man, Tyson didn't even know what area code he was in at that point. He had no clue. He didn't even know. Forget Japan. He didn't know he was even in Tokyo when he took that punch, man. He was out of shape. He wasn't ready for the fight. This is after D'Amato's already passed away. Don King's been in Tyson's ear, pretty much telling Tyson, yeah, man, do whatever you want to do. It's cool. Tyson's work ethic at that point had gone tremendously downhill. He wasn't preparing for fights like he used to. He wasn't focused anymore. And all that showed. And it wasn't the end for him, obviously, but man, that image of him on his knees trying to put the mouthpiece back in his mouth, dude, what an image that was. Crazy.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it shocked him and his, crew in the corner as well. I mean, when Douglas kind of, really walloped him one time, and his eyebrows swelled up so big. I mean, it was almost as big as his head. They didn't have the proper equipment to take the swelling down for that. They had like an ice bag, they were trying to take the swelling down, and it didn't work. So they weren't even prepared for this eventuality. They expected to, for Tyson to go on and face Holyfield, for the championship, but they were looking past Douglas. And get this, for motivation, Douglas was using the death of his mother 23 days prior, to get ready for Tyson. And I think he even said that he was going to shock the world. But I mean, who could have believed this guy? This guy come out of nowhere. Buster Douglas? Who was that? Nobody knew him. But I mean, he made a name for himself in this one night, and this is what Buster Douglas will always be remembered for. But I mean, hey, if you're going to be remembered for something, why not the biggest upset in boxing history and maybe even sports history altogether?
Yeah, man. Buster Douglas follows me on Twitter. I'm not really sure why, but all of a sudden one day the notification showed up. Buster Douglas has followed you. I'm like, okay. I still don't have any idea why. So he saw my name on a wrestling column or something. I suppose. I have no idea. But I remember I thanked him. I said, thanks, champ, or something in that regard. But yeah, man, you're right. He's, if that's what you hang your hat on for the rest of your life, that's all good. I'd be okay with that. And Douglas seems like a good guy, and, didn't have a great career after that, but he was world heavyweight champion. How many guys can say that? How many people walking around right now can say they were undisputed champion in professional boxing? Not a lot, right? So, yeah, that's something to hang your hat on, man. And like we said, for as much as Lewis and Holyfield exposed Tyson for the fighter that he was turning into, for the lack of focus and all the other stuff that was going on with him, Douglas maybe was the first one to turn the light bulb on, and he showed, dude, if there was any other fighter out there who had been approached about maybe fighting Tyson and said, I'm not going to get in there, are you crazy? This gave these guys reason to say, wait a minute, Douglas figured this out. Whenever you talked about baseball earlier, whenever a young pitcher in the major leagues goes on a streak, and you're like, oh, this guy's good. Or whenever a scorer in the NBA, and man, he's killing it, and they can't touch him. Or a great hitter, and everything he that's pitched to him, he hits it out of the park. Yeah, but dude, eventually the defense catches up, and it's only a matter of time until they start shutting that player down. And they tried it for years with Jordan. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But I kind of associate that with this. Like, Tyson kind of got figured out, which maybe is not fair to him because he had a lot going on, right? But it kind of felt like everyone else kind of caught up to where he was and figured him out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, finally we saw a kink in the armor. Tyson's personal life, it went over into his professional boxing career. And, I would have liked to have seen what he could have done had that not happened. Because I think Tyson in his prime, when his mind was set and focused, his trainer was there, I don't think Buster Douglas could have pulled this off, But, not taking anything away from Douglas, but I just don't think he could have pulled it off if Tyson was in his right mind. He was training properly. He was focused. Yeah, I think Tyson ends it very quickly. But there's a little bit of controversy. Tyson's corner claimed that Douglas didn't make the 10 count after Tyson knocked him down. I went back and watched a video, and I don't know how accurate it is, but they've got a clock counting in the corner of the screen, and it goes to 00 before Douglas gets back up. So I don't know. Maybe somebody's made an error or mistake on that, but I just know there was a bit of controversy.
Well, I tell you what matters, and I know what you're talking about. I always looked at that and said, the only thing that matters is what does Douglas hear the ref saying? Because Douglas can't see a clock. You assume he can't see a monitor or a big screen. He's just listening to the ref. And if the ref's going too slow or too fast or whatever, and obviously he took the full 9.75 to get up. And if that was his goal, and dude, if it's me, I'm going to take all the count I can get. It's like pro wrestling, the heel slides outside the ring, and it's like, well, he's got 10 to think about it. He'll take 9.75. It's all good, right? So I mean, why not take all the time you can to recover and to breathe for a second or two and then get back up? You got 10 seconds to breathe almost. So, no, I get that. And at the time, I guess if I was in Tyson's camp, I'd be saying that too, because here is your cash cow, right? Your golden goose that lays the eggs, that feeds everybody, that feeds the entourage and the crew and the trainers and their families and everybody else. And the caravan of people that were paid because of Tyson. And here's this guy on his back. And you're like, uh-oh. I mean, what just happened? So yeah, dude, if it were me, I'd probably be claiming that as well. And I know we're bouncing. And, you know, I don't want this whole episode to be, well, Tyson got found out and he sucked. No, it's not that. Because I'm telling you, the biggest part of this story that I will remember personally is the fact that this dude was absolutely a beast. You said the word beast. A savage, no doubt. An absolute monster. And I know those words get thrown around sometimes. And the last thing we want to do, folks, is use words that, you know, because of Tyson's ethnicity or whatever. And please understand, we mean these words, you know, purely in the sense of in the boxing ring. That's all this is. Because, you know, it's 2020, man. You got to understand the way the world is now. And we never want to be considered someone that's throwing around words loosely. But, man, we're comic book guys. The Thing, the Hulk, you know, the Abomination, Doomsday. I mean, all these characters apply to this guy. I mean, he, again, a beast, a monster, a Hulk. You know, not the tallest guy I've ever seen, but he didn't need to be. And honestly, I think his height played to his advantage because you had these 6-foot-plus tall guys swinging for the fences, and Tyson didn't have to do a lot of work to duck those punches, man. So I think that actually helped his game. And, dude, talk about seeing him like Trevor Berbick, for example. The first world title that Tyson won was the WBC championship from Trevor Berbick. Dude, that guy was knocked for a loop, man. Berbick took 2-3 seconds and could not get back to his feet. It looked like he just got hit by a car and was staggering around like he was drunk or something. I'll never forget that image, man. Like he got his clock cleaned by Iron Mike Tyson.
I don't think he ever saw it coming. Maybe he underestimated Iron Mike, the baddest man, who would become the baddest man on the planet. And, you know, Mike used that to his advantage. You know, he was the challenger, probably the underdog, I'm sure. And sometimes the underdog, you know, they have more motivation. And this was his first championship match. So, you know, Mike was hungry. He was ready to take the title. And he wasn't going to look back. You know, he went on to become the first guy to unify all 3 titles. And then later against Spinks, you know, he took the lineal name of champion, which means the man that beat the man, kind of like Ric Flair.
Right.
So, yeah, this was the first step in a long journey for Tyson. You know, he had to get that first championship out of the way. And, you know, from then on, man, it was history.
And, you know, unfortunately, D'Amato didn't make it this long. He didn't make, just as Tyson was turning pro, D'Amato was not along for the ride, which is unfortunate because he didn't get to see any of these world championship victories. And I'm sure that, I don't know if you could say that haunts Tyson, because now to hear Tyson talk, he's completely at peace. And he doesn't even like to think about who he was then. He rarely talks about it. He doesn't like to talk about it. And he just prefers to move on with his life and just consider that another chapter, which is very, very deep, very zen of him, you know, to just completely move on from that life and say, yeah, it was who I used to be, but I'm not that guy anymore. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. Tyson could have spent the rest of his life hanging his hat on that boxing career and paid millions of dollars just for speaking engagements and just for personal appearances and doing all this other stuff, but that's not really what he wanted to do. But yeah, man, flashing back, like you said, man, long road to get to where he wanted to go. The fight with Marvis Frazier, Joe Frazier's son, who, you know, at that point probably questioned, why in the world am I even trying to be a boxer tonight? Because Mike killed him. You know, rest in peace, Maurice Frazier. We kid. But yeah, just took his head off. And dude, that was on the way to Berbick. I mean, we should have known what this guy was capable of when we saw this happen. So yeah, he showed very early on that, oh my God, this guy he's a titan of the ring. He's an absolute titan. And like, to your point, imagine if D'Amato had been there in Tyson's first few fights, he was fine. The recklessness, the getting in trouble with the law, running his mouth, cursing every breath in every interview he gave, wasn't really manifesting itself yet. So had D'Amato lived a few more years, maybe none of that would have happened. Maybe Tyson would not have been convicted of rape to begin with. Maybe he would never got in trouble to begin with. I don't know. Because D'Amato was, his regulator, his mentor, his friend, his father figure that Tyson desperately needed. But yeah, man, those fights were utterly insane. So you mentioned Spinks, of course, that happened on June 27, 1988. And Spinks had taken the championship from Larry Holmes in a 15-round decision in 85. So these two guys get in the ring. And if you think about classic boxers, Michael Spinks' name, it comes to mind. He's got a very memorable name. He was a very memorable fighter. And dude, at the time, all these analysts were talking about was a huge clash of styles. Tyson was aggressive and, trying to cause infighting and all these conflicts going on. And Spinks was like, known for his footwork, known for his song and dance sort of in the ring. And 91 seconds into this fight, Spinks is knocked the F out, okay? And at this point, man, people looked at this fight and said, well, this is the peak. How does it get any better than this? Man, talk to me about that. Crazy fight.
Yeah, I recall my dad commenting on Spinks saying he looks nervous. He looks like he's afraid or scared of Tyson. And, I had to admit, he did look nervous. I don't know what it was, but yeah, we were expecting a much longer fight. We were hoping for anyway. And it turned out to be another quick one. Tyson knocked him down, stunned him, and Spinks got back up. And he should have just stayed down because Tyson, caught him square in the head there, and down went Spinks again. And he doesn't get back up. He's in la la land. And that was the biggest moment in Tyson's career up to that point. And maybe because he had unified the three titles, WBA, WBC, and IBF, all that remained was to take Spinks out, and he did that. So, this was the crowning achievement of his career.
And, at that time, hindsight is 20/20. You're the highest paid fighter in the world, probably the highest paid athlete in the world, I would guess. I don't know who could have been paid better at that time. Jordan maybe, possibly, but maybe not, right? So at that point, what do you got left to do? Imagine if Tyson had come out and said, I'm done, I'm out. Talk about, and it sounds far-fetched now considering everything that happened later. I get it. But man, that would have been, what a way to go out, man. Like, let's talk about Jordan. Jordan went out on top, right? The second time, right? So, but yeah, man, he could have went out on top because, like you said, what was left to do after Spinks? He'd pretty much conquered everyone, right?
I think it was a matter of showing that this wasn't a fluke. He wanted to defend those titles and, go on and show everybody that he was the man. So he still had motivation. He still had passion for boxing, and he wanted to continue on this journey and see where it took him. Obviously it went, south later on, as we mentioned before. But yeah, I think Tyson just wanted to further his legacy.
Yeah, I can see that. And, to your point about proving that none of this was a fluke, there's been criticism over the years from people, from boxing analysts in particular, who say that, Tyson's fights on the road to becoming a heavyweight and after the fact were very carefully handpicked and very carefully set up, the right boxers at the right time, people that Tyson probably would not have an issue knocking out, taking down. You can say that stuff, I guess, and there's some merit to it. There's definitely some merit to that discussion. I'll grant you that. But Tyson still had to do the work. It's not like someone stepped in a stunt double and did the punching for him. He still had to go in there and get the job done, and he got it done more often than not. He was the guy that, got in there and just destroyed, Hulk smash. We talked about Brock Lesnar. This is the second time we mentioned him, but talk about Brock Lesnar doing Hulk smash. That's what Mike was doing, was Hulk smash. And just, it's like, load the gun and then point it, and the gun will do the work. All you got to do is pull the trigger, and whoever pulled the trigger, Tyson would just go do the work and do the devastation and the damage that comes after the barrel. The bullet leaves the barrel. I mean, that's what he did. He was a tank. Crazy, man.
I like the fact that you compare him to Brock Lesnar, because in the show that we see, if we suspend our disbelief, Brock Lesnar is extremely intimidating. This is one of the few guys over the years since I've been watching wrestling that, I could say, scares me. I would not want to make this guy angry. I would not want this guy angry at me. So, yeah, Tyson is the Brock Lesnar of boxing. And, to go back to your point about maybe fights were set up for Tyson opponents at the right time, well, let me just say this. The champions that he beat were champions for a reason, right? I mean, right. It wasn't like these were, cookie-cutter opponents. These guys had the championships, so Tyson had to go through them, and he did full force, Raging Bull, and, he just mulled them over.
Yeah, good points, man. I can't argue with anything you said. Valid points all the way around. And listen, we mentioned Larry Holmes. We can't forget that Tyson faced Holmes, knocked him out. Of course he did, in the 4th round. And that fight happened January 22nd, 1988. And Holmes is a legend in this business, in this sport. An absolute legend.
And it was Larry Holmes' only knockout in his career that he suffered. So that's saying something right there. I think, 75 fights?
Yes. And,
yes, the only time he was knocked out. I mean, he was probably in the twilight of his career, but again, he was still in there. He was still fighting, so he had a little left in the tank.
And honestly, does it matter when you pin Ric Flair? What age? It don't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you can say in your career you pinned Ric Flair and took the title from him, I don't think it matters if he's 20 or 50. Doesn't make a difference. So yeah. I mean, to your point, it's 12 of his career, but another feather in the cap of Mike Tyson, and he had a lot of feathers, man. He was a Native American at some point with the headdress. I mean, he's Wahoo McDaniel, baby. That's what he was. So yeah, man. And again, we talk about the peekaboo style, and just poetry in motion. Turn off the volume when you watch a classic fight with Tyson, and just watch him. Don't even watch his opponent, but just watch him and how he knows exactly what to do. Dude, this was a guy that took to training like a fish to water. And you could see it. It was like when he was in the ring, he was in a sparring session with his trainers. That's what it looked like to me. He never looked lost. He never looked upset. He never looked frustrated. Now, he would later. But I'm talking about in his prime on the way up and after he won the championships. I mean, he did not look to me like a guy who was being rushed, who didn't know what he was supposed to do, who was getting nervous or lost his place. Razor sharp and laser focused all the time was Mike Tyson.
Yeah, great points. And he made an art out of boxing, the way he was bobbing and weaving and getting that right punch in at the right time and connecting with it. Like I said, he had a lot of accuracy, not a lot of waste there. And, he really made his opponents suffer. And it's like, man, they're falling by the wayside. They're falling like flies. I noticed that, after a lot of knockouts, as the referee's counting, the referee steps in sometimes and stops the fight. He's an angel of mercy. And, thank goodness they did, because Tyson probably would have killed his opponent. But, after some of the knockouts, while the referee's still counting, Mike goes over to his corner and holds his gloves out as to say, handcuff me, I just committed a crime.
Right. And, that's good stuff. And, man, listen, we also can't forget, well, look, kids, part of the game of being a heavyweight boxer, and especially a heavyweight champion of the world, no matter what sport you're talking about, especially boxing, though, swagger. Ali had it. Dusty had it in wrestling. I mean, it's just, again, the ability to talk people into the building, the ability to make fans want to come to see that fight. You live 3 hours from the venue, you're gonna drive 3 hours. You live in another town, you're gonna take a plane. You're gonna do everything you can to get there. You're going to take the last $60 you have that month on your cable bill and buy the pay-per-view because you just have to see this guy fight. I mean, Tyson had that. He may not have had it with his promos and his interviews, but man, his work in the ring, it was must-watch TV. And the fights were getting huge pay-per-view buys. The ratings, just this guy was a huge money draw because people couldn't wait to see him. And again, the swagger, the attitude, the showtime of this guy, the showboating nature of professional boxing in and of itself. Again, Muhammad Ali, greatest of all time. And Tyson loved and respected Ali, hung out with him and his wife, and called him champ. Everyone called Ali champ, right? And Tyson was no different. Tyson was a young man and was so inspired by Ali. You know what? I think if you're not a boxing fan, that kind of gets lost, if I'm being honest, and forgotten, unfortunately. But Tyson was a huge follower of Ali and really believed in that guy and was humbled to be in his presence.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're in the sport of boxing, you should be a fan of Ali because he was the man back in his time, his era. He made, like Tyson did in the 80s and kind of the 90s, he put boxing on the map. He could walk the walk and talk the talk, and Muhammad Ali had a lot of swagger, charisma, and he backed it up in the ring. And I just still have that image of him standing over his opponent with his glove, and it looks like he's screaming at him. That's one of the most iconic images I've ever seen. I think Tyson in his prime may have been able to beat Ali in his prime. Yeah, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
Oh, see, now you're going into dangerous waters, man, because a lot of, guys our age, older, maybe younger too, had debated this thing for years. Like, we got to see Jordan play Magic. We got to see Jordan play Bird. We never got to see Ali versus Tyson. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of those things, man, where it's like, who wins the fight? I mean, here's what I think. I think had that fight happened in both their primes, Ali would have locked him up as much as he could to tire him out. And we could see that Ali could take a punch. I mean, we've heard the stories about Foreman putting Ali in the corner and hitting everything he had, putting him against the ropes, hitting everything he had. And Ali's got his arms up doing the rope-a-dope stuff. And Foreman's getting winded. He's getting tired. And Ali drops his gloves and says, "Is that all you got?" And Foreman goes, "Yeah, actually it is." Because that's all he had. So
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, I was just speculating there. It would be the biggest fight of all time, gross the most money, I'm sure. And the biggest extravaganza in boxing history. It would just be nice to kind of speculate on that, and think what could have happened.
Hey, listen, my bit of speculation on that dream fight is not for nothing, folks, but we have to assume Ali could even take that punch from Tyson. As hard as that guy hit, like we said, tremendous amount of power. And we'd have to believe that Ali had seen the peekaboo style before from other fighters. So, would he have been able to counter? I don't know. I would like to think Ali would have been able to take on any contender in his prime, and he did. But, dude, I don't know. I think that's one of those fun debates that depends on where you're coming from. Are you coming at it in terms of, I'm a fan of this guy or that guy? Are you coming at it from a logical standpoint? Are you trying to apply real-world logic to a fight that can never happen? Dude, it's fun to speculate, man, and I love doing it because it's one of those dream matches, unfortunately, we'll never get to see. It's like Sting versus Taker in their prime. I mean, who would have... And that's different. It's not about who wins. It's about the show of it all, But this is about, Ali versus Tyson. That's about who wins, baby. I mean, that would have been monstrous. Do you think that Tyson in the late 80s, early 90s was... And, some people have called him the Ali of his generation in terms of being a draw and a character and someone that fans gravitated to and couldn't stop watching. But, dude, we're talking about two entirely different personalities. I mean, how do you compare those two guys in terms of not just the kind of fire they were, but the kind of impact they had on their sport, respectively?
I think Ali, he had, of course, more charisma, and he was a better talker on the mic. But Tyson, I think, of course, Tyson gets the nod on the power in the category of power punching. Ali not nearly as powerful, I don't think. But Ali would, probably maybe fought a smarter fight. Sometimes early in his career, Tyson was raw, and he was just, swinging for the fence, trying to take the guy's head off. So I think Ali could have used a master strategy and gotten around that somehow. He's a very smart fighter, and sometimes I think maybe like you said, kind of like Evander and Lennox, he maybe would have frustrated Tyson. And the longer the fight goes, the more opportunity Tyson's opponent has to stay alive and win that match. So Tyson's MO was like, let me get this over with as soon as possible. So when these fights started going the distance, maybe Tyson was a little bit out of his element. He didn't know how to react. He was like, man, I've never gone through this before. Usually first round knockout, or fourth round knockout, fifth round, but never. There were a few fights that went longer than that, but Tyson always ended up getting the decision. But Vander and Lennox, they were different guys. I think they used their smarts against Tyson, and they fought the better fight.
I like the way you said that about, the longer a fight goes, the more it benefits Tyson's opponent. I think it does, because it gives that guy, assuming the other guy's not beat up too much and is not too tired, not too winded, it's giving him the opportunity to he's seeing the pattern. He's starting, and if he's smart at all in terms of boxing, knowledge and awareness, and sort of street smarts between the ropes, right? But if he's got that, and he's got that intangible that it takes to be a successful fighter in the sport, he's been able to see, okay, I see what he's doing now, so I just got to bide my time. He's breathing a little bit harder and a little bit harder every time the next round starts. I got to wait, choose my moments. But again, that's assuming you can make it out of the first round. But yeah, if it's a war of attrition and it goes the distance, it's Ali's fight. But if Ali can't stand the storm, can't weather the storm in the first round, he's gone, he's out, and Tyson's knocking him out. I mean, I think that's probably, in terms of any boxer that Tyson faced, with all due respect to Ali, obviously the greatest of all time. But I think that was sort of the way everyone looked at it, from the analysts to the fans, to everybody in between. You mentioned Holyfield and Lewis. Holyfield, to me, was the one guy that I saw. And, man, we saw and heard a lot of dopes, a lot of mopes who talk big fight at the press conference. And you're like, this freaking white boy is going to get knocked the F out, period. He's going to get killed, call his parents, write the eulogy. This fool's going down. And man, they did. Like, all the freaking time. And they were laughing out loud at the press conference about some of the things these guys were saying. But when Holyfield talked, it was much different. And he had the pedigree to back it up. He's a very talented fighter. And dude, when he stepped in the ring with Tyson for the first time, no fear. And one of the things that got Tyson over was that Tyson, most of the time, had you beat before you even stepped into the ring. Because he locked eyes with you, he would not let go. He held you in that, like that tractor beam, just pulled you in, right? And from the time he saw you coming down the aisle, he never took his eyes off of you. If he was the last man in, he never took his eyes off of you. The entire time. To the time you tapped gloves the first time, he never stopped watching. And just that ice cold stare, that heartless, ruthless glance, that cold-hearted stare that made you just, sweat ice cubes at that point. Man, he had that in spades. He tries that on Evander. Evander's not even affected. I mean, dude, what are you thinking when the opening bell of that first fight between these two guys starts, and it's obvious Holyfield's not going down without a fight.
Tyson comes out and tries to end it early, business as usual. But Evander, he stays on his feet. He rocked him a little bit, but, Evander weathered the storm, as the comment you made before. And Evander was not intimidated. He wasn't scared like most of Tyson's other opponents had been. Because, like you said, sometimes the fight between Tyson and whoever his opponent was at the time was already over before it even began. I watched a video where he's face-to-face with this guy in the ring. The referee's there, and the guy's going back and forth, and Tyson's eyes are following him. It's like a painting, where anywhere you go, the eyes are going to follow you.
Right.
So yeah, if I'm his opponent, and I'm seeing that, I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I got myself into? I was like, can we get out of this right now? Can we cancel this fight? Hey, Mike, you're the winner. I remember joking with some friends, when at this time we made the comment, for a really good payday to set you up for life, a million or two, I would go into the ring and, bell rings, let Tyson hit you, and you just fall down, take the 10 count, knockout, and you're rich.
Right.
But thinking about it now, you wouldn't be able to enjoy the money because you'd be like a vegetable. You'd be in a rest home somewhere. You wouldn't have much. You wouldn't have a life at all. You'd be on life support because that's how hard Tyson hit. But yes, it was very surprising. It was odd because Evander, he was not thrown off by Tyson. He went in there and stood his ground, and he got past the early rounds. And I think he frustrated Tyson. He wore him down, and man, he went the distance. And wow, another shock because nobody gave Evander a chance. I don't believe in that fight. And in the midst of this fight, you can hear fans chanting Holyfield. It kind of reminds me of Rocky IV when Rocky goes over to Russia to take on Ivan Drago, and you think, well, Ivan's gonna kill him, but the further the fight went on, here are the Russian fans in the audience chanting Rocky, so he kind of won them over. I think Holyfield won that crowd over, and at this point Tyson had to be concerned because this was unheard of.
Yeah, good comparisons, man, for sure. And I like what you said. The Holyfield surprised a lot of people. And man, he was the Batman to Tyson's Joker in a lot of respects because, here was Holyfield, a Christian guy, he spoke about God and was a man of faith and was very, I guess gentleman's sport. Gentleman's the way to put it, just like Lennox Lewis was. And didn't get baited into promos, didn't get baited into cheap shots and taking shots during an interview or whatever. This is not the kind of guy he was. He let his actions speak for him. And man, like you said, they're chanting Holyfield in that first fight, man. He won that crowd over. And dude, they wanted to see Tyson get knocked out. They couldn't wait for it. I mean, we know what happened. Holyfield won the first fight. The second fight happens. Tyson's disqualified. The infamous moment where he takes a chunk out of his ear. And the fact, dude, they're friends now. And it's almost like, was that a pro wrestling angle where he was told take a chunk out of his ear and it's show business? And I mean, I know it's not, right? But like as a pro wrestling fan, you're like, oh, it was show business. That was all work, brother. Because now they're like best buddies and stuff. And they're very cordial with each other. And I'm like, dude, what? How in the world? I don't know. It's a very surreal thing in 2020. A lot of this year. Most of 2020 is surreal, let's be honest. But to see, Tyson's got this podcast now called Hot Boxing. And I've watched some of the episodes on YouTube and Holyfield's there and they're laughing and smiling. I'm like, dude, he bit off your ear, man.
Yeah. So. It's kind of like when Mick Foley, as his character Cactus Jack, lost an ear against Big Van Vader in WCW. It's crazy. Well, I guess you have to, give credit where credit is due. Holyfield, talking about being a religious man, a man of God, he was able to forgive Tyson for that because to me, that's kind of unforgivable. And, this guy was trying to tear your ear off and did. I mentioned the word animal. This was the animal coming out in Tyson. This was like something you'd see in a gangster movie or something. I don't know. I mean, really, it was odd, strange. Never would have imagined anything like this occurring in a boxing match. It did remind me a little bit of wrestling because, that's something you would expect in that sport. And, going back to the first fight, when Holyfield shocked the world and Tyson, after the fight, he was being interviewed, and I really liked the comments he made. He said, he prayed to God before the fight and all he had to do was show up, and the fight was won. So I was like, wow, Evander Holyfield had faith, going into this fight. He fully expected to win if he, kept on his game, and he did. So, I mean, yeah, he was almost like a prophet there.
Yeah, and listen, we're having fun talking about Tyson and the intimidation factor and the fearlessness and his brutish strength, and he's a power puncher and he's all this stuff, and he's a whole lot more than that, and he's a phenom in the business, folks. At no point in this show do we want to romanticize Tyson as a man. I mean, we know he got in trouble with the law. The guy spent almost 3 years in prison for rape. I mean, he later became a drug addict. Admittedly started doing cocaine at like 10 or 11, tried drugs at that early on in his life. I mean, my kid will be 12 soon. I mean, I'll put him through a table if he ever even tries to look at a beer. You're in no way, shape, or form mentally prepared at all for anything chemical-wise to be put inside of your body. And this guy was, trying cocaine at 11, 12 years old. It's insane. And yeah, he was not the best guy. And let's be honest, call it for what it is. I don't know Mike Tyson personally. He might be a jerk now. He doesn't seem to be. But we know he got a little too, he was too physical with women. Call it for what it is. He got in trouble a lot. Okay, and women through the years accused him of all kinds of things. And, to me, there's not a side to be taken here. There's not, well, listen, there's two sides of this. No, there's not. There is never an excuse ever to put your hands on a woman, especially after she says no, okay? So let's get that clear. Again, we don't want to romanticize this guy as a man. I mean, we're focusing on his career as a boxer, but we can't leave out the black shadows that are lurking around this guy's life. And he had a lot of things to clean up. He had a lot of things to get right. And man, he was, he started making the headlines, dude, for a lot more than just winning fights really early in the first round. I mean, he was, again, as we said, getting in trouble with the law, running his mouth, starting pull aparts in the middle of a boxing press conference. And, we just started seeing the dark side of this guy, and dude, that to me, in some regard, people say, oh, well, Tom, that adds to his mystique. That adds to his character. It's the baddest man on the planet. In my opinion, at that time, the way I viewed it was, nah, this is not the baddest man on the planet. This guy has Napoleon complex. He wants you to believe. And he did in the ring. I'm saying in the ring, he was the real deal. No offense to Evander Real Deal Holyfield, okay? But I'm talking about on the mic, Tyson was screaming as loud as he could to get you to know, hey, I'm everything I say I am, and I don't care about you. I don't care about your family, and I'll take all of you to hell with me. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like at that point, I'm like, come on, just shut up and get in the ring. Do you know what I'm saying?
Especially the comments he made, directed towards Lennox Lewis about, he was going to eat his children for breakfast. Yeah, I mean, it's going too far. You can say what you want to about the other guy, but you start bringing his family into it, then it gets personal. And, Lennox, he went in and he showed Tyson up, like Evander did. And just to see Tyson down on the mat and, his nose is bloodied, I think his eyes cut. I think Lennox really, brought him back to reality. And Tyson, yeah, he was full of pomp and, aggression, and he wanted everybody to realize that, he felt he was the greatest. He was of the cloth of Jack Dempsey and others. But, I mean, sometimes you have to, you look at yourself and say, is this really me? But Lennox Lewis, like Evander, once again, as we spoke of, he exposed Tyson, and he really frustrated him over and over again. And the longer the fight goes, the more advantage the opponent has.
Yeah, and, we try to give credit where credit's due here. Holyfield deserves all the credit in the world. Being a man's man in his own right, standing up to the myth and the mystique and the image of the unstoppable, the invincible, the juggernaut that is Mike Tyson. Holyfield didn't even blink. I mean, he stared down the barrel of a 6-shooter pointed straight at his temple and didn't even blink, man. He just didn't care. And he's like, I'm tougher than this guy. I have all the confidence in the world. And you could see that a mile away. And Lewis had the same thing. And look, Lewis and Tyson knew each other for years before the fights happened. And Tyson's talking trash about him, They go to Lewis for a response. Lewis barely even acknowledges the comments. And I'm like, I love this guy. I already love this guy because he's not playing Tyson's game. He's not feeding into that. I remember at the time saying to someone, oh, I love Lennox Lewis, man. Because at that point, if I'm being honest, at that point, I didn't care anymore about Tyson. I thought his intimidation stuff had worn very thin. This was the post-prison Mike Tyson. We knew all the stuff that he had done. And it's like, at that point, I just wanted somebody. Holyfield shut him up for a while. And now I really wanted Lewis to shut him up, and he did. And dude, honestly, I mean, when the fight with Lewis came around, Tyson wanted out. He flat out said years later he wanted out. And yeah, it was after the eat your children comments like you talked about. And it was very controversial. Every time that Tyson opened his mouth, he made the news, and it was crazy. But what's funny is that after Lewis absolutely, folks, dominated this fight like Tyson wasn't even there. He knocked Tyson out with the right hand in the 8th round. And what's funny is, after this was all said and done, Tyson was actually respectful and praised Lennox Lewis for the win. And at the time, it was the highest grossing event in pay-per-view history, generating $106.9 million from almost 2 million buys in the United States alone. Like, at that time, and again, like years later, he admitted, I wanted out. I didn't want to do this anymore. It's almost like he couldn't stand himself. And I'll tell you this about Tyson, man. Love him or hate him or whatever, he is brutally honest about who he is and who he was. He doesn't hold back. And he'll tell you, I was a jerk. I was an idiot. I was a moron. I believed my own hype. And I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have said this. He's an absolute open book, dude. He's not hiding anything from anybody. I mean, if you hear him now, talk about a guy that's reflective on who he was in the past. Mike Tyson is it.
Yeah, I really respect Mike Tyson, for his mindset right now. If he had had this kind of mindset in his professional career before he faced Evander and Lennox, things might have been different. Those two guys stood their ground and didn't let Tyson get to them, get under their skin, and they fought their fights, and they never wavered. They knew that all they had to do was show up, like as Evander said, and the fight was won. They weren't intimidated, and Tyson's tricks. I think Tyson, when he didn't see fear in Evander's face, he thought, "Whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? This isn't working anymore." So, I guess he figured, well, I've got to try to put this guy away early, like I've always done. And when it didn't happen, Tyson was lost. He was like, "Man, what am I going to do now?"
Well said. He's, as we said earlier in the show, folks, he got figured out, and I guess you could say that at the end of the day, Mike Tyson's biggest opponent and worst defeat was himself. I mean, had Mike not gotten in his own way all those years, he may have never lost a fight. I mean, you got to remember, folks, who we're talking about, how extremely dominant Mike Tyson was. He was 35-0 with 31 knockouts, 19 of those knockouts in the first round. Let me say that again. 35-0, 31 knockouts, 19 of those knockouts in the first round. Who does that?
Yeah, not bad for a career, right? Up to that point. And, his overall record is extremely impressive for, the time and era that he boxed in. 50 wins, 6 losses, 44 KOs, and 2 no decisions. Yeah, he's, I guess this guy belongs in the Boxing Hall of Fame. I don't know.
I see what you did there. Yes, of course he did. And of course he went in because he's Mike Tyson. And oh my God. And yeah, you're right. I like how you said, not too bad, not too shabby. I mean, if that's all you can do, that's fine. Yeah, man. He's a complex guy. The first time you ever heard Mike Tyson talk, you're like, he sounds like that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I expected Billy D. Williams or if I expected Michael Clark Duncan or that voice to come out of this like Mr. T, something brutish and strong and powerful. But yet we got Michael Jackson out of Mike Tyson's mouth. And you're like, what? So that was...
And Yeah, that's something else that fueled the fire inside of Mike Tyson to go on and have a boxing career. I read where kids made fun of him for his light voice and that lisp. So, yeah, Mike Tyson had to learn to fight, and he did. Boy, did he ever.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it, man. Yeah, I wasn't going to be the guy to tell him he sounded like a girl. That wasn't going to be me because, my God, you know. And, not for nothing, but in a lot of those fights, if you go back and watch them, when that guy, the ref's counting him out or ending the fight, Tyson is the first one over there to help the guy back up to his feet, which gets overlooked sometimes. But, man, the ref, in the first few fights you see, you're like, oh, my God, he's going to finish the job, right? Because he's just that – he was that scary at the time, right?
Yeah, I like the fact, I respect Mike Tyson for – showing great sportsmanship after the match had been finished and called. He went over to check on the guy and to see how he was doing, and I got to give credit where credit's due. Mike, the savage beast, the assassin that he was, when the match was going on afterwards, he went over and checked on the guy. So yeah, he had a human side. I'm not saying that he was inhuman. He went over to check on the guy, and I really respected that.
Did you have Mike Tyson's Punch-Out for the Nintendo?
Oh, yeah, I had that. I was going to mention that, and that was one of my favorite games ever. Even though the graphics in the world we live in today, it would be considered ancient and caveman style. I mean, I've been thinking about going back and trying to get a Nintendo and get that game because I loved it so much. I remember the journey to get to Tyson was difficult enough, but when you face Tyson, you thought, man, it's unbelievable how good he is. I mean, little Max sitting there getting his brains, knocked out. The fight's over in seconds, just like in real life. And I remember actually watching my friend's cousin fight Tyson, for the first few times. He couldn't figure it out, and he says he got so frustrated, he was cussing. He made the comment that they would not have made the game if you couldn't beat Tyson, so there's got to be a way. And he finally figured it out and watched in disbelief as he, knocked Tyson out, and Little Max the winner. So eventually I got to where I could knock Tyson out myself, and I thought I'd actually accomplished something there. Oh, wow.
It's like scoring 50 on Jordan and shutting him down every time you guard him. Good luck, right?
You got to put it on the easy level for that.
Yeah, you got to want it, kids. You got to want it. You got to work hard. Put the work in. Apply yourself. I got to tell you, man, before we started recording today, I actually was thinking about that. I was looking over my notes here, and I was thinking, I need to pick up the Nintendo and again get this because I think I might actually do that, and hopefully I won't have to pay a fortune for it. That'd be nice. So, I kind of feel like Tyson is one of those subjects that we could just talk about forever. And dude, we've ended so many shows with the same sort of thought process. Like, man, we should come back and talk about this again. I mean, we totally could, because again, folks, he's so complex of a character. He's not just, he's not a one-dimensional guy. He's deep. He's a changed man. We're gonna hope he's a changed man. There's something about Mike Tyson I really want to like. He's worked his way back into pop culture. He's doing voices in cartoons, for goodness sake, and he's in the Hangover films, and he's getting himself back out there in the world. He's got this podcast, and he's big into the world of cannabis at this time, big time with marijuana, and it's become a lifestyle for him. And if you've never watched the Joe Rogan interview, I highly recommend everyone to go check that out. I mean, very well done on Rogan's podcast. So this is a guy that seems like, I was going to say he's come full circle, but he hasn't, because I think he's come to a much better place now. And again, folks, this is about what we're seeing from a distance. We don't know what the guy's really like behind closed doors in 2020. We have no idea. I know he's married, he's got a family, and he seems to be okay. So it's a fascinating topic, man, and it's been a blast on this show, and I feel like there's a lot more we could talk about. I've been watching Mike Tyson fights for 4 straight days. I'll probably watch some more for the weeks out. So, man, I think the time's here. What's your final thoughts on Iron Mike Tyson?
I like to think that boxing was good for Tyson. It got him off the streets. It gave him purpose in life at that point. But Tyson did much more for the sport. He really gave back a lot. He was the face of boxing in his era for years. Hardest hitter ever, I think so. He was one of the most exciting fighters to watch, even though a lot of his matches were over very quickly. Tyson became immortalized and will forever be remembered for his power and quickness. And I have to say, if I were to make a mold of a boxer, it would have to be Mike Tyson. I would probably have maybe the mind of Evander Holyfield as well, because Tyson broke the mold of boxing, and there'll never be another like him.
Well said. I don't think we've seen anybody like Tyson. And, people talk about champ today, Tyson Fury, who is a very, physically speaking, he's a very odd-looking fighter, but he was named after Mike Tyson, a huge inspiration. But if you ask Mike Tyson, he doesn't keep up with boxing now. I mean, he's so totally removed himself from that world, which is odd to me as being a pro wrestling guy, because in what we're accustomed to seeing out of the business of pro wrestling, it's hard to leave. You feel like once it's in your blood, you got to keep coming back. For Tyson, he's moved on from boxing. And imagine what a trainer this guy could be if he really wanted to do it. And he could probably produce God knows how many champions. I mean, the guy has his acumen for the sport, his smarts, everything he's been through, all the things he could teach, off the charts. And yes, troubled past. Yes, a lot of things he did wrong. But what an athlete he was during his time. What a phenom. What a pop culture icon he is today. And one thing's for sure about Mike Tyson, Iron Mike Tyson will never be forgotten. And that is Mike Tyson. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.